In February of 1938, Walt Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the first feature-length animated film in the US, began its national release into theaters, and became an unprecedented hit that changed the film industry forever.
Hollywood naysayers, convinced no audience would ever sit through a feature-length cartoon, had dubbed the film Disney's Folly.
However, in the years leading up to its release, many believed the film would be a failure, but in reality, this couldn't have been further from the truth. In early 1934, after a long day of work at the Hyperion Studios, Walt Disney gave 50 cents to a group of his key animators to buy themselves dinner across the street, asking they come back to meet him at the Disney soundstage. And upon their return, Walt Disney proceeded to act out the entire story of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and revealed his plans to create their first feature-length animated film.
Who's afraid of the big bad wolf?
By this point in Walt Disney's career, he had already achieved success with his animated shorts, and had received 2 Academy Awards and 4 nominations, including an honorary Oscar for the creation of Mickey Mouse. And for quite some time, he'd been toying with the idea of a feature-length animation, despite the belief of many that no one would want to sit through a cartoon for that length of time. Using the box office flop of The Adventures of Prince Ahmed, the first ever color feature-length animated film, as an example when it released in Germany in 1926, with some even suggesting that long exposure to color cartoons could damage the eyes.
In the world's film capital is the studio that stands as a monument to the great genius of Walt Disney, master of a new form of popular art that has captivated millions of moviegoers.
Regardless, Walt Disney had a vision and was determined to bring it to a reality, so production began that summer, and over the next 3.5 years, the studio would grow from less than 100 employees to over 600, and at various points in production had 300 to 500 working solely on Snow White. And being the perfectionist he was, several times portions of work on the film had to essentially be started from scratch, such as when a new version of the multiplane camera was invented to give scenes an even greater illusion of depth, which was first tested in the short film The Old Mill. Due to the sheer scale and ambitiousness of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, its production was closely followed by news outlets all over the country, and while initially reported as having a budget of $350,000, as the film neared completion, the cost had grown to $1.5 million, forcing Walt Disney to mortgage his own house, even despite skepticism from his brother Roy and wife Lillian over whether the film would succeed, with even some of those working on the ambitious project having concerns.
I had many people tell me when I was working there that who wants to see a full-length cartoon?
And it wasn't just those close to him that had their doubts, as many in Hollywood referred to the film as Disney's Folly, even in the days leading up to Snow White's premiere.
All of Hollywood turned out last night for the world premiere of Walt Disney's $1.5 million feature-length animated fairy tale, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
On December 21st, 1937, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs had its premiere at the Carthay Circle Theater, in a star-studded event like none other. But the true highlight of the evening would be the standing ovation at the end of the screening, with many having been moved to tears, and the film became an overnight sensation within Hollywood.
After last night's premiere, Disney's Folly turned into Disney's Triumph, as the audience laughed and cheered and wept in sympathy with the film's memorable characters.
And while Snow White had some critics over its animation style, praise of the film only grew during its run at the Radio City Music Hall in New York City and the Sheridan in Miami, Florida. However, the real test would be when Snow White was released to the general public in February of 1938. And while February 4th is often cited as the first day of its wide release, the Sparks Florida Theater in St. Petersburg had the film as early as February 2nd.
Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is more than a great picture. It's a thrilling experience in happiness.
For the rest of the month, word continued to spread about this innovative film, with movie theaters across the country and even those outside the US eager to have it play at their location, which quickly broke attendance records in multiple cities over the following months, and drew such a large audience that it was brought back to theaters multiple times throughout the year, which at the time was practically unheard of, and would become the highest-grossing film of 1938.
More than 250,000 paintings like these were created by Walt Disney and his staff of artists to make the most daring adventure in the history of motion pictures.
The film rose to such high critical acclaim that Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was considered as a Best Picture nominee, but perhaps due to those who argued a cartoon should not be nominated alongside films with real actors, it would only receive a nomination for Best Music, though Walt Disney would take home his 7th Oscar for The Old Mill. However, the following year, Walt Disney was awarded a specially made Oscar statue, recognizing Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs as an on-screen innovation pioneering a new field of entertainment. And over the Academy's 90-year-plus history, only one other specially made Oscar statue has ever been awarded.
Isn't it bright and shiny?
Oh, it's beautiful.
Aren't you proud of it, Mr. Disney?
Well, I'm so proud I think I'll bust.
The rest is history, as its monumental success allowed Walt Disney to build his new studio and Disney headquarters in Burbank, California, and would eventually play a major role in the creation of Disneyland. And today, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, even when adjusted for inflation, is still in the top 10 highest-grossing films of all time, both worldwide and domestically, making what was once nicknamed Disney's Folly a true example of if you can dream it, you can do it. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of This Month in February History. And if you would like to help support Yesterworld, check out the links on screen and in the description, and I'll see you next time.